We'll be taking care of PV every day. Taking care of PV every way. We've been taking care of PV. It's all ours. Taking care of PV and investing in our town PV. We'll be taking care of PV.
Hello and welcome to another episode of PV in Focus, where we're giving you an inside look at how our town gets things done every day. We're so glad you've joined us. On this episode, we are out in nature at one of our town parks talking with Town of Prescott Valley Principal Planner John Jacobson to discuss a great new project that's in the works, the Wildlife Corridor. John, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here. John is one of our planners in our Development Services Department, and we're going to be talking about a really exciting new initiative that we're launching. Before we jump into it, I always like to kind of share with everyone that's listening and watching us a little bit about you. So how long have you worked for the Town of Prescott Valley? And then what do you do? What's your position?
Okay. Well, thank you, and I appreciate being here. We've lived in town about 7 years. Been with the town and working with you for over a year and a half, and really enjoying participating what we're talking about today, the Wildlife Corridor. By profession, I'm a landscape architect, but as most people, or a lot of people might know, planning is a significant component of that, and really attracted me to the town. Principal planner. And to answer your question, a lot of what we do is long-term planning, long-range planning, interspersed with daily activities. But these types of projects, Wildlife Corridor, some of the other projects we're involved in are really interesting, and I'm really enjoying it.
Awesome. I always like to know what drew someone to the profession that they chose. And
Yes.
A planner, I always think of Sim City, of like planning like something
Right.
on a computer game. But tell us what drew you to that profession, and what are the things that you like most about it?
Right. We've talked a lot about community service and just being a kind of a cog in the machine of shaping our environment in our community in this case. It's just really interesting to me, and it's engaging. It's not as routine maybe as some other professions, though I like routine.
So getting to
But
work
it's
with lots of
engaging.
people.
Yeah, different
Yeah.
people, different types of projects, visions like this with long-term is just really interesting, and getting to know the folks in town. Like I said, we've been here a little while, and that really kind of infuses what we're doing. They're not just projects, it's really people. That's really what we focus on. And we've learned over the years that that's what makes a successful project, is to engage the community and staff and management, and really to move things along on any given long-range project.
One of the things, about our community is it's a place where a lot of people move to, right?
Yes.
They choose Prescott Valley from, for many different places that people come, right?
Right.
Why do you think, what makes Prescott Valley such a special part of our state and this region?
Well, I think it's interesting. We hear from a lot of people, and I can speak for us as a family. What drew us here, the climate, the air quality, the highlands kind of environment, the wildlife, but really moderate here. Again, getting back to climate, but we really enjoy it. And I think a lot of people are drawn here, and sometimes we don't talk about even the proximity. The National Forest, I mean, what a contrast between where we sit today
Yeah.
and a few miles up the road. We're in the Prescott Forest, and the trails and the ponds and lakes. But really the grasslands here, the wildlife, we talk a lot about the pronghorn. I think that's what drew a lot of people here. And I hear over and over when people visit how nice the people are here, and accommodating and responsive. And that made an impact on us. And I hear that from a lot of community members, that that's what drew them here.
You just hit on some things, and I hear the same things, of why people chose this community. They first arrived here. They may not have known much about the community, but they see the mountain vistas, the grasslands, that open space, just, the clean air, and I think people immediately like, hey, this feels good. This feels like a great place to live. Why is it so important that we plan, that we think about the long term, and especially picking up on all those things that we just said that people pick, that they love about this place? Why is it so important that we really plan to make sure that we protect those areas?
Well, I think you hit on it. I mean, that's what drew us here. What better than to preserve that, what we love about this area, and a way to do that. And we know, we've talked an awful lot with citizens and amongst ourselves about development and how things evolve in a town like this. And wow, what is the importance of preserving that and really dovetailing it with the wildlife and preserving that and the development. So I think it's just really interesting and engaging.
We did a survey last year. You were a part of it, and as many of our departments were, with the community. And one of the top things that came out of that survey was concern about open space and preserving that open space. Can you talk about just, the impact if, again, without that long-term planning of trying to protect wildlife corridors and habitat, the impact that it has on, in this case, antelope, that's, I think, the signature species that everyone thinks of with our grasslands. But it's a lot more than just antelope. We're talking about a large number of different species. So why is it so important that we are thinking about how to protect those areas for the wildlife?
Well, I think the overarching theme would be quality of life, and the components of that.
Quality of life for humans in being able to enjoy that open space, see that open space. Okay.
Well, think about it now that you touch on it, the quality of life for different species even,
Absolutely.
Right? We talk so much about quality of life because the world revolves around us, right?
Yep.
But I think we consider
humans do think
exactly.
That, right?
So, but I think you talk about wildlife, and we think about this. I mean, I think that's the importance of it, is the quality of life, and what drew us here. We touched on that, and why we would want to stay here and attract other people, other businesses, other activities, while maintaining that quality of life.
Well, and I appreciate, and I really appreciate that you did pick up that it's not just, it shouldn't be about just humans and what our quality of life is, although that we want to make sure that we have the highest quality of life for everyone that lives in our community. But it is about how do we live in balance with nature, with our environment. And I think that if we destroy the natural environment around us and you limit what species can exist, that obviously will have a direct impact on all of us.
Exactly. And the habitats. I mean, we talk about migration, we talk about corridor, but a part of that, not only the migration corridor, but the habitats that are a little more contained in microclimates and all those things, and how important that is to sustain vegetation and wildlife and all those things that we enjoy. And again, leading to quality of life.
That community survey that we just talked about, mentioned growth as a major concern, but also the need to preserve open space areas and protect habitat areas for all of the different types of species that live in our area. So, what is Prescott Valley doing to address this? What initiatives are we launching that really is going to start to make a difference, and I think protect what we all love for future generations?
Well, I think the survey was one piece of data that brought this to our attention. We've talked about it even before that, but that was a catalyst, I think, for us to really take a close look at this and ask ourselves those questions. What can we do? What's most productive? So what we've done is enlisted a professional consultant. They offer services in environmental, cultural, landscape architecture, and they have a history of producing wildlife corridor guides and studies. So what we're doing is working closely with them, with our staffs and your background and experience in these types of things, and have really hit the ground running. We've had focus groups. We're in the first phase. There are two phases overall to the efforts that we're going through. The first phase is termed the Foundation Guide.
Okay.
Just by definition, you would understand that's data collection, analysis, and we're going to wrap that up. And then the second phase will be actually producing the corridor plan proper that I think people envision more. But there's a lot of data and analysis to even get to that point where we can start to form a plan, as we call it. But the goal is to really put in place some very stringent guidelines on development so that we're dovetailing again with wildlife, with the natural habitats and development, and accommodating development in the best way possible. And I think some of those outcomes will show and come to the surface. Some of the things we've talked about is increased property value. May sound counterintuitive, but if you think about a residential or commercial use that abuts an open space or a wildlife corridor, you can imagine, and we've seen it historically, there are case studies where the property values are increased. And that's something not to price people out, but I think is attractive to developers and gets back again to the quality of life.
Well, and I think, when people, they want to live near those open space areas,
Right.
and so it adds value to a particular property type
Exactly.
thing. You mentioned, development and economic development, growth, which sometimes can not be a valued, thing in this
Right.
community. There's a lot of concern with it. So, again, we keep referencing the survey. If, anyone listening online or watching us, wants to dig in deeper, all of that data or survey data is available on our website. And there's a lot of fascinating takeaways from that. But again, we will probably continue to be a place that people seek out. It's going to be a place that people want to move to. It's a place, hopefully, that we can attract new jobs, new industries, higher wages, that help to support our whole overall community. So while that is important, having a healthy economy is very important. At the same time, and I would say equally important, is preserving our environment. And so really this initiative is getting at that. It is, how do we allow for growth where growth is appropriate to be placed, good planning,
Right.
but also how do we make sure that we protect those corridors for migration routes and open space areas and the things that drew us here, the
Right.
open space.
Well, and I think it gets down to kind of the simplification of development. If we talk about development, how do we manage that? And a good example would be our existing open space. We look at landowners. Is it state-owned? Is it privately owned? And depending on what the answer to that is, how do we manage that, or how do we move ahead with developing or defining these corridors and habitats? Historically, we could look at land swaps, for example. If it's state land, we have privately owned land in town. We've already experienced some land swaps for different reasons, for commercial and private development. So we see that as an opportunity to negotiate with developers. Even if it's state-owned, developers go to the state to try to acquire it, goes to auction, all those things. We want to participate in that, get in the front lines and communicate our desires and our vision so that we can do that. And if you look at a specific development, we're really proposing or promoting what's known as cluster development, where if somebody owns a large piece of land, rather than have half-acre lots, well, let's pull those together, cluster those smaller lots, and that will reveal the open
more land. Okay.
Open up more land as part of their development. And really, there's a lot of education that has to go along with this, not only developers, but citizens. And the reason I mention that is that concept of cluster development can be misunderstood as high density. Well, it is higher density where you cluster those, but overall on the development, it's the same density or less. But we've really pulled together the built environment and provided more open space. That's one example of how we can move ahead.
Now, obviously, animals probably don't respect town boundary lines.
Right.
Like, they don't really care about, what property's zoned what, and it's really, it's their land. It's their survival, right? They eat from that land, and our mountain ranges represent areas where animals need to, traverse from and to for breeding purposes and whatnot. And so Obviously, this is much bigger than just Prescott Valley. What are we doing, to work in a broader regional way to make sure that we secure the right type of habitat and corridors for the future?
One of the areas of focus that we've talked about, and we've termed it regionally coordinated and locally implemented. And what that means is we are very involved with SIMPO, where we've been coordinating with them directly. We continue to. They are involved in our events that we have and activities, and we are in theirs. We share information. So that's part of the regional coordination. And then you can imagine at the state level with Game and Fish, we've got to know Jeff Gagnon, who does presentations on pronghorn and other species, and just a wealth of information. And he's coordinating with SIMPO with us as well, really to get to that end, that vision. Because you're right, migration doesn't recognize town boundaries, and we understand that and see the importance of it. And so we're looking at all the data, for example, that Game and Fish has collected. The example of pronghorn, they collar them, which means they put GPS, they track them, they learn their habits. So we have access to all that data. Jeff is on one of our focus groups, so it gives you an idea just how we're really looking broadly, regionally, as well as specifically in town here in Prescott Valley.
So that working with SIMPO, the Central Yavapai Metropolitan Planning Organization, as well as Prescott, Chino Valley, and really the county. The county is going to have to be a big player in this ultimately, because once outside of the town boundary limits, it really you are in unincorporated Yavapai County, and we want to be thinking about that corridor all the way up through Paulden and beyond. Correct.
And through those relationships, you can imagine they're biologists. If you look at Game and Fish, state level, you mentioned the county, and some of the things that we've learned from them are some of the accommodations for wildlife. Game and Fish informs us that friendly fencing, for example, and I think of it, you mentioned unincorporated area. Well, there's a lot of fencing that keeps cattle in, keeps other animals out to protect that relationship. What we've learned is that friendly fencing, 24, 18 inches above ground, so that in this case pronghorn can get under. They've learned these things over the years, so it really informs us on what we need to be thinking about and implementing locally as well.
So you just mentioned something about specifically about fencing. So ultimately in the end, when we're kind of through our process of working with the consultant, Logan Simpson, which has got a long record of working with other communities in this way, we will have specific policies and specific ordinances that will direct and guide development going forward, correct?
Yes. Oh, exactly. And that's really what we're focused on. I think over the years we've learned this, and some of us have seen in our past lives where planning documents are really put in place, but unfortunately they might sit on a shelf and maybe picked up later, maybe not. So we've learned this. So we're really focused on that implementation locally that I mentioned, so that we are accomplishing that. We're looking at strict guidelines, we're looking at code updates. So again, if a developer comes to town or we see something that needs to be addressed on the wildlife side, we have the tools to implement it, not just talk about it, not just voice our perspective on it or our opinions or our thoughts that we'd like to have. We're really going to make it formal so that we can help guide smart growth. It's not to inhibit really development. We want to work with developers, we want to work with local citizens and accommodate the wildlife.
We want to have balance.
Balance and the benefit for all the participants. And there'll be negotiation, as you can imagine, but what we've seen case studies that you've been involved in the past is that, again, it increases the quality of life, the value of the property potentially, and the desire for people to come and want to be adjacent to open space.
Well, John, thank you so much. I am really excited about this initiative. I think it's going to be something that defines Prescott Valley in a whole new way. I think it will reinforce again what drew all of us that currently live here to make sure we preserve that open space, the air quality, the quality of life for future generations. And so I think you're a part of a groundbreaking initiative for the town. And something that is going to leave a lasting impact for future generations. So thank you for your leadership and work on it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We really appreciate you joining us and want to remind you that you can also find this as a podcast wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you've enjoyed it or learned a thing or two, Feel free to share this with your friends or other residents so they can join in the conversation as well. New episodes are dropped on the first and third Wednesdays of the month. Until next time, be well, and we'll be taking care of PV.
We'll be taking care of PV.